Hey there and welcome to part 2 of the class. I hope you found part 1 really insightful, and I hope it's really opened your eyes to exactly what's going on with your little one, developmental wise and sleep wise, and why they are struggling so much at this moment, not just with sleep but just with life in general. There's so much change going on for your baby. So in part 1 I discussed how even though it's not appropriate to do official sleep training, you can do sleep shaping to help your baby sleep. And sleep shaping works great in that if you are regular and consistent with your sleep shaping habits and practice little and often, when your baby is developmentally ready to sleep through the night, they will. Meaning you'll never had to sleep train in the first place. So sleep shaping is really good, particularly if you're a parent who is not keen on hearing your baby cry or using cry out types of sleep training even after your baby gets to 6 months of age. Sleep shaping is a brilliant way of helping your baby learn how to sleep. So sleep shaping, or how I'm going to encourage you to sleep shape, is to 1, keep a diary or a journal. 2, follow a daily routine and not a strict or rigid schedule. 3, create a sleep space and an environment that encourages sleep. 4, have a bedtime routine and a pre-nap routine and do it daily. Introduce a dream feed if you want to, and minimize night feeds using the DODR method. And then I'm going to be covering in part 3 how to help your baby practice self-settling and gentle settling methods, and talking about practicing consistently and why it's so important. So, first of all, let's talk about keeping a sleep diary or a journal and why it's so important. So this is important, especially if you're sleep deprived, because when you're tired, everything seems and feels worse than it really is. You might think you might be able to recall when your baby last slept, how long they slept for, or how many times they woke up last night and what time they woke up, when they fed and how long for. But I promise you, what you think happened and what really happened is 2 very different things. Our memories do not work properly when we are sleep deprived, meaning our ability to recall past events is impaired. You're tired. Recalling accurately from memory is impossible. So keeping note will give you clarity and control in how your little one sleeps and in helping your little one to sleep better. It makes it easier to identify patterns of behavior, temperament, preferences, mood, natural patterns of tiredness and alert periods, because the information is there right in front of you in black and white. So you'll know at a glance over a couple of days when they ate, when they slept, their mood, and etc. So what do we record? All you're recording when I'm saying to you make a note or keep a sleep diary is to just make a note of what's happening and when it's happening. So you can either make note in a diary or in a notepad of some sort, or use an app. I think it's really useful to get yourself a special little diary if you want, or download an app if you're a smartphone addict like me. The lovely thing about keeping a diary is that it's a really nice keepsake. It's something that you can look back on in years from now when your little ones are much bigger and you're getting all the sleep that you want. It'll be nice to look back and see just how difficult or how quickly you were able to improve your little one's sleep. So as I said before, make a note of what your little one is doing and when they are doing it. Write down what time of day it is and what's happening or what's just happening. And as you write down what you see or you're experiencing, you'll become more aware of sleep cues, behavior and that sort of thing. So you might find in time after a few days that you might not need to make quite so many notes as you did initially, because you become aware of tired cues and certain behaviors and the times that they're happening, and you're able to build a routine around that if you don't have a daily routine in place already. So what should you make note of? As I said before, times they fell asleep and times they woke up, and the length of time that they were asleep. But it can also be helpful if you make notes of where they slept to, how they slept, were they well rested, were they restless, did they sleep quite fidgety, how long they napped, how they went to sleep as well. Were they assisted by you? Were they self-settled? Were they fed to sleep? Was it a nap on the go? And how they woke up. Did they wake up on their own or did you wake them? And also, were they particularly tired or groggy when you woke them up as well? Sometimes that's important information to know. So how much sleep does my 4 to 6 month old need? Well, in part 1, I shared with you that on average, your 4 to 6 month old needs on average about between 13 and 15 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. 4 to 5 hours of that time should be doing daytime naps, and about 9 to 10 hours of that time should be resting or sleeping at night. But please do bear in mind, these are just general guidelines. Your baby might be sleeping more than that. They might be sleeping way less than that. These are just average guidelines. Babies are very unique, but it is useful to know these to see if there is a sleep debt. So after a few days of keeping a note, have a look at the total amount of sleep that your baby is getting in naps and at night. Is your baby getting enough daytime sleep in total, do you think? Is there a sleep debt? How much sleep is your baby getting at night? At the end of every 24-hour period, total up how much sleep your baby is getting. How does that compare to the above total? So you might not be able to do that today, but after a couple of days, look back, count up when they napped and how long each nap was for and how much nap total time they had, and the same with nighttime sleep as well. It can be really helpful to see if there is a sleep debt. So as I said, after a few days, keep note of keeping notes. Have a look at the total amount of sleep that your baby is getting at night and in naps. Is baby getting enough daytime sleep? How much sleep is baby getting at night? And how does it compare? It may be worth making notes of moods and behaviours as well to help you recognise any tired cues, because tired cues can be quite easy to miss. So it's really important for you to create a flow to your day, the dreaded routine. Everybody hears the word routine and thinks, oh my God, routine. But babies respond especially well to having your daily routine in place during periods of rapid development. And it's really, really helpful if you can follow some sort of daily routine in some sort. As long as it's a flexible routine, that's important. But it is really good to have things that you do regularly every single day, because this helps your baby to predict what's happening now and what's happening next in a world where they have no concept of time. So think about how it would feel if you didn't know what time it was and you didn't know where you were supposed to be or what you were supposed to do or what was meant to be happening. It'd be quite unnerving. And so having a routine in place that you do every day in the same order is comforting. And note that I said routine and not strict schedule. So think of your daytime routine as a predictable sequence of events that follow one after the other, rather than a rigid schedule led by time. Because while following time is important to a degree, you do need to be flexible. We have babies and, we live lives. Think of your day as including regular times of activity and regular times to help your baby to calm and wind down from that activity. So think of your regular sequence of events as a way of building the energy up and bringing it back down again, so that you can help your baby to nap and rest when they need to, but also play and interact and explore at the right time too. So create a flow to your day that allows you to build up to the active times and then allows you to bring your baby's energy levels back down to help them to rest when it's time for naps. Ideally, you want to be starting and ending your day at roughly the same times. This helps to set your baby's body clock and their circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm you might have heard of before, and the circadian rhythm is going to really help you to help your baby to understand when they're meant to be awake and when they're meant to be sleeping. So your baby's circadian rhythm governs when your baby is awake and alert and when they get tired and are ready for sleep, as well as other body functions. The circadian rhythm is affected by various different factors. These are cortisol, melatonin, exposure to light, eating habits, blood pressure, temperature, and bowel movements and urination. Now, there are many hormones and chemicals and proteins that have an impact on sleep, such as serotonin and tryptophan, which is the melatonin precursor, oxytocin and adrenaline. But the two important hormones that we're going to focus on right now are melanin and cortisol. Now, cortisol is released by the body when it's exposed to broad spectrum daylight. So when you're taken outside and exposed to sunlight, this is when the body creates and releases cortisol. It impacts sleep as well as emotional regulation. So this is why when we are sleep deprived, we can become particularly emotional, because when you're sleep deprived, you in fact become overtired. Cortisol gets released when you're overtired and makes you emotional and cranky and irritable and fractious. So cortisol keeps us awake and alert, and it is necessary not just to keep us awake and alert when we become overtired, but it's also necessary for metabolism, by counteracting the role of insulin, raising blood sugar levels. And also cortisol is released in response to stress too, and can build up in your body the more stressed and overtired you get. So levels of cortisol will fluctuate throughout the day as well, being at their highest in the morning and at their lowest levels at night. Now, melatonin is released by the body when it's exposed to darkness or dimmed light. It induces feelings of drowsiness, but it doesn't make you sleep. But it can improve the quality of sleep. So do bear this in mind when you are getting your little ones ready for bed and you're wondering if they are overtired and they're going to struggle with sleep. Dim the lights and get that melatonin release going. Daylight inhibits melatonin release, and so melatonin levels will be low throughout the day when exposed to natural light. Babies that are 12 weeks and younger cannot make their own melatonin. They cannot produce their own melatonin. But babies will be exposed to tryptophan, which, as I mentioned before, is the chemical precursor to melatonin via breast milk. So if you're a breastfeeding mum, get to breastfeeding in the early evening, because this will give your baby tryptophan, which is the precursor to melatonin and has the same effect. And this is why breastfeeding babies helps them to fall asleep so easily and why babies sleep so well after being breastfed. It's also important to note as well that light from TVs and smartphones and computers also emit a blue light, which also inhibits melatonin release. So if you've ever noticed when you're chilling out at home that you're starting to feel tired, or you think it's time for you to go to bed, and then you go to bed and get your phone out and you realize that you've spent an hour on your phone and all of a sudden you're not tired anymore, it's because the blue light frequency that's behind the light in computers and smartphones and TVs can actually inhibit melatonin release. So before 12 weeks of age, the circadian rhythm is not established. So this means that your baby's body does not recognize the difference between day and night, and that melatonin is not produced endogenously, i.e. your baby cannot make it on their own. But the other things that can impact the circadian rhythm are noise. Some of us are more sensitive to noise than others, and most babies find background noise comforting because it's similar to sounds of the womb. Research has shown that white noise can be very effective at calming babies for sleep because of its similarity to sounds from the womb. So, researchers found that pink noise, which is another form of white noise, improves the quality of deep sleep, with more delta waves recorded during sleep, with pink noise playing throughout than children who sleep without any noise at all throughout. So playing pink and white noise during naps and nighttime sleep can not only be a good sensory cue, but it can also help to improve the quality of sleep that your babies get. Noise or pink noise during naps or nighttime sleep can be a really good sensory cue or a sleep association to create with your baby. So if you're not using white noise, maybe you should start. It's really useful, and I actually find that I use now white noise to help me sleep. It's a really good way of helping you to nod off if you're finding it hard to switch off. And by the way, You and the Sheep has the white noise game all wrong. So I'm going to leave a link to a blog post underneath this video so you can go and figure out how to use white noise the right way. So, eating habits and temperature. Many grown-ups have consistent habits around food as well, such as eating breakfast, lunch and dinner roughly at the same times every day. And have you ever noticed that sometimes if you miss your habitual time to eat your meals, your stomach rumbles even if you've not long ago eaten? So sometimes if you eat at a different time of the day, but you're used to having lunch at 1:30, your stomach will start rumbling at that time anyway, because that's what your body's been used to. And then this also leads to your body becoming used to digesting food at certain times of the day as well, leading to more predictable bowel movements sometimes too. So, have you ever noticed how when you go on holiday, they always recommend that the best way to adjust to the time zone in the destination that you're headed to and to minimize jet lag is to eat and sleep on local time as soon as you land? And that's because doing that and exposing yourself to the broad spectrum daylight in the place where you are helps to reset your body clock. So this is why it's really important to consider these factors and to make sure you have your daily routine so that you can help to set your body clock as well as build those neural pathways that I mentioned in part 1. And also, a drop in body temperature at bedtime helps with sleepiness too, as the body temperature tends to fluctuate during the day, and our body temperature tends to be at its lowest in the early hours of the morning and the highest in the evening. So you might want to consider when you go to bed, if you're putting your little one to bed earlier, if you go to bed a little bit later, adding an additional layer just in case your little one is waking up in the early hours, because their body temperature has dropped and they're now feeling cold. Sometimes it's helpful to add an extra layer to your baby when you go to bed, just to make sure that they're not waking up because of coldness. And this is why in the summer we often struggle to nod off at night, because we are too hot and it's the time of the day when our body temperature is at its highest. But then it also gets quite cold in the early hours of the morning as well. So, can you see now why having a routine in place is really helpful prior to your circadian rhythm maturing? Because even though the body clock isn't governing what you do, your baby has gotten used to you doing things at a certain way at a certain time. It's a neural pathway that you've walked over regularly, so it's now probably become habit, and it's really, really helpful, especially if you're feeding and napping at regular times during the day, and having your bedtime routine in place every day at the same time to help your baby to wind down for nighttime sleep. And if you're having distinct behavior between daytime and nighttime, this is how you can help your baby learn about the difference between day and night before the circadian rhythm matures. But even after it's matured, you can still do all those things and help it to mature by doing these things consistently. It's not overly important to have a routine in place before 12 weeks, but it definitely helps the circadian rhythm to mature, and it instigates or helps to instigate regular wake and sleep periods when carried out consistently. Having a routine also helps you to avoid overtiredness as well. So having a daily routine with regular and predictable naps at the right times can help to avoid overtiredness and undertiredness too. Overtiredness will contribute to frequent night wakings, early wake-ups. So if your baby's waking up between 4 and 6 a.m, that is what is really considered an early wake-up. A baby waking up anytime after 6 a.m. isn't really considered early waking, but actually just normal for a baby. And shortened naps and nap refusal, as well as difficulty sleeping and staying asleep. These things can all be attributed down to just overtiredness sometimes. And an overtired baby is also a lot more susceptible to hypnic jerks, which is what I mentioned in part 1. And this is where your baby will startle awake while nodding off into NREM sleep stage 1. And it will often feel like they're falling out of bed, and they'll jerk and wake themselves up. And sometimes we adults do it as well when we're particularly overtired. As I said, hypnic jerks occur when our baby enters into light NREM sleep stages and causes rapid pulse and sometimes even sweating. So what causes overtiredness, and why does it make sleep difficult? When your baby sleeps at night and wakes in the morning, think of their sleep tank as being full. So as the day progresses, the sleep tank begins to empty, using the sleep in its tank like fuel as sleep pressure or the drive to sleep builds. If that sleep pressure builds too much, or the tank is empty and your little one doesn't get to sleep or stays awake longer than the ideal awake window, then the baby's body releases hormones, i.e. fuel reserves, to help your baby's body cope with the stress of not resting or being asleep at the optimal time. These hormones are our friends cortisol and adrenaline. Now, you already know that cortisol is released throughout the day anyway, but imagine if your baby is frequently overtired and even more cortisol than is needed is being released, and all this cortisol builds up. More on this later. So these hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, act by raising the heart rate, blood pressure, and blood sugar levels, and they can make you and your baby feel very sweaty and stressed. So basically, cortisol acts like coffee to your baby's system. It keeps your little one awake and alert and very active, but it doesn't stop them feeling tired. So this is why overtiredness can be a problem, because it's obvious they're tired and they want to sleep, but they're awake, they're alert, they're active, and trying to get them to sleep can be really challenging. And remember, adrenaline is the fight or flight hormone. So I often say to parents, when your child is overtired, they are going to fight and run away from sleep like their life depends on it. So the more tired your baby becomes, the more cortisol that gets released. And unfortunately, cortisol has a cumulative effect. So it builds up in your system. So the more overtired your baby gets, or the more stressed your baby gets, the more cortisol builds, and the more difficult your little one will find it to get to sleep and stay asleep. Or they will fall asleep or crash into sleep too quickly, making the transition through sleep cycles even more challenging for them, resulting in hypnic jerks and the like. So, young babies and newborns have a very, very short period of time before their sleep pressure builds and they need help to sleep. sometimes even as little as 30 and 45 minutes. But babies at this age and stage of development, between 4 to 6 months, have awake windows or intervals of about 90 minutes to 2 hours. These are averages. So your little one can get tired very, very quickly, and sometimes as quickly as 90 minutes, but every baby is different. So there might be some 4 to 6 month olds that can happily stay awake for 2 hours before they get tired. There might be some that need to sort of settle to sleep after sort of 85, 90 minutes. There might be others that can last a bit longer. So this is why keeping a diary is important, so you can recognize when your baby's awake window might be coming to a close. And a great way of realizing when that awake window has passed, or if your baby's overtired, is that you'll see tired cues, and then all of a sudden they'll have this burst of energy out of nowhere, and that's usually when you realize that this energy has been dispersed into your baby's body and they're overtired. I also find as well that as the day progresses, your baby's awake window sometimes gets longer. So this is what I mean. Here's an example. So say, for example, baby wakes up at 7 a.m. but gets tired and is ready to sleep by 8:30 and naps for an hour. So that would be a 90-minute nap gap or awake window. They would then wake up at 9:30 and then can stay awake a little bit longer at this nap gap and not need to nap again until maybe 11:30, which would be a 2-hour nap gap. And then they'd sleep for 2 hours, waking up at 1:30, and then they might be okay for the rest of the afternoon. They might need a short nap between 4 p.m. of 30 minutes to an hour to top them up, and then wake up at 4:30, and then they'll be nicely tired and ready for bed about 7:30, leaving another nap gap between the last nap and bedtime of 2.5 to 3 hours. So this here is just a guideline or an outline of a daily routine for a baby. But as I said, it is a guideline. It's not set in stone. Every baby is different. And this is why it's helpful for you to keep a journal or a diary, so you can see what patterns your baby has and if you can work with them to incorporate some sort of bedtime routine. So how will you know when your baby's tired? So look for early signs of tiredness and sleep cues. There are early signs and there are late signs, and then usually after the late signs is when that cortisol and adrenaline release will happen. So the early signs are fussing, yawning, loss of interest in toys, gaze aversion, glazed expression or staring off into space, looking pale or going quiet or uninterested. And late signs of tiredness are usually sort of grimacing, back arching, wanting to feed for comfort, rubbing the eyes, pulling the ears, bringing up the knees and rigorous wriggling, or rubbing and burying their face in their carer's chest or shoulder. So these are all cues that your baby might be getting ready to want sleep. So every baby is different and unique and may display other signs of tiredness too. So keep an eye on the time since your baby's last nap and see how much time has lapsed since. Or if your baby may be displaying tired signs or cues, it might be time to help them to settle for a nap if they are. And the only way to eliminate overtiredness is to help your baby to sleep when they need it, and then to help them to be active at times when they need to be awake, because that's the only way to release this cortisol, is to be active. So help them to use their gross motor skills to use up that excess energy, and then help them to wind down, ready for sleep and naps the way you normally would. So let's talk about pre-nap routines and bedtime routines, because these are really, really important. Now more than ever, having a predictable bedtime and nap time routine for your baby is important. And it's also important that you do them consistently. That's every day, day in, day out. In a period of rapid growth and development and learning, having a familiar routine before naps and bedtimes can be comforting and help baby to predict what's going to happen. And the more consistent you are with your winding down routines, the better they will work. These routines are intended to help to bring your little one's energy levels down and help prepare them for sleep using a predictable sequence of events before going to sleep. So bedtime routines should be approximately 30 minutes long, and pre-nap routines should be really just scaled down versions of the bedtime routine that are about 5 to 10 minutes long. And again, you should be doing them regularly and consistently before naps and before bedtime every day. Bedtime routines should be approximately 30 minutes too long, but if it's too long, it will lose its focus, and if it's too short, then baby's often not relaxed or wound down enough to go to sleep. So as long as it's simple and easy to repeat day in, day out, that's a good bedtime routine. And as long as it helps your baby to transition from daytime to nighttime behavior, then that's a good routine. And do remember that everything that happens after the bedtime routine should be quiet, low, no stimulation, and dark. This is when nighttime behavior sets in. And nighttime behavior for me is when it gets super boring, it gets super dark. I don't talk. I am responsive physically and through my body language, but I keep all talk and stimulation to an absolute minimum because it's nighttime and we're meant to be sleeping. So as I said before, I recommend that parents model the behavior that they want their babies and their children to have overnight. So make sure all nighttime behavior from you is responsive and loving, but boring until the morning when you're ready to begin the day again. So my ideal bedtime routine usually consists of bath, massage, story, feed, and then bed. Many parents don't like to do a daily bath for fear of it drying out baby's skin, but it's not the actual bath itself that can dry baby's skin, because a bath consists of water. Water is moisture. It's what you do after the bath or the products that you use during bath time. So you don't have to use any products during bath time at all. So please don't feel like you have to use baby bath or whatever. It is okay to just use nothing but water. And if you are worried about losing moisture, I do think it's important to incorporate simple massage after bath as well. This helps to replace the moisture that's left from drying after the bath, and massage is really, really relaxing and will help your baby to relax after bath time. Baths can energize and excite some babies and children, and this is fine, but this is why it's important to have bath at the beginning of the bedtime routine and use the rest of the routine to help your baby to wind down. And please note, when I mention using simple massage to help your baby to get to sleep, you don't need to go and do any sort of baby massage classes at all. It can just literally be as simple as taking slow, deliberate strokes to massage and rub in any oils. So I recommend using cold pressed coconut oil, which is good for massage. It's really, really easily absorbed and it smells really yummy. But use whatever you feel is appropriate for your baby's skin. You know your baby better than I do. Now, a pre-nap routine, again, is just a really simple and shortened version of the bedtime routine, obviously without the bath and the massage. But it could just be something as simple as a nappy change, taking them upstairs into their room, story, lullaby, a feed, and then settling them to sleep. Again, it's something that needs to be predictable and that you do in the same order every single day. So use your winding down routines consistently, and this will help your baby to recognize that sleep is coming. The more you do these routines, the easier it should be for your baby to understand and recognize that sleep is coming. And it should make settling them at naps times and sleep times a lot easier as well. So let's look at the sleep space and an environment for sleep. The ideal and the safest space for a baby to sleep is alone, back to sleep on a firm, flat surface without pillows, cot bumpers or cushions or loose bedding. And it is also recommended that babies share the same room as their mothers in the first 6 months as well. That's not to say that you can't safely co-sleep. So I'll post a link underneath this video as well. If you are a co-sleeping mum and you'd like advice on how to do that safely, that will be available as well. So you ideally want to keep the room nice and dark. The darker the better, and the reason for this is that because your baby's curiosity will override the need to sleep, and having a dark room will help your baby in the long run when they are able to settle to sleep on their own. Now, a lot of parents I know will create and decorate beautiful nurseries for their little ones, and unfortunately when it comes to sleep, these beautiful nurseries are just so stimulating and exciting to look at. Baby can't focus on going to sleep because of all these wonderful things to see. So this is why making or having the room as dark as possible is really helpful, not only when it comes to settling them to sleep, but also if they wake up during the night as well. Because if your baby is able to settle themselves back to sleep and they don't need you for anything and the room is nice and dark, then it's far more likely that they'll settle back to sleep if there's nothing to distract them from doing so. Remember, your baby's curiosity will override the need to sleep. They might still need help getting back to sleep in the short term until they learn to do this on their own though. And also remember what I mentioned about keeping the room cool, and sorry, not keeping the room cool, but temperature having an impact on the ability to fall asleep as well. So having a room that is too warm can make sleep challenging as well. So it's better to have a room that's more on the cooler side than on the warm side. And you can always use layers to keep the baby warm. So it's better to have several thinner layers of sheets and blankets than one thick one. So I often recommend to parents that you, before you go to bed, go into your baby's room and add an additional layer, just so that they don't wake up in the early hours of the morning due to being cold. And also dress your baby in 100% cotton fibres as well. That can be helpful to keep the baby warm when it's cold and keep the baby cool when it's hot. And also, it's really helpful if the environment for sleep where your baby sleeps is quiet, but not too quiet. So remember what I said about some babies finding it a little bit alarming sleeping in complete silence, and how white noise or pink noise can be really, really helpful. So consider using this as well. And remember to check out the link that I shared with you earlier about how to use white noise the right way to help your baby sleep. So, feeding responsively. I don't like to tell parents or advise mums when it is they should be feeding, purely because breastfeeding is very, very hard to feed on a schedule, and every day is going to be different. But if you're breastfeeding, if breastfeeding, it can be difficult feeding to a schedule, but by this stage, if you're in the habit of following a daily flow, your feeds or the time that you feed should be becoming much more predictable. I always encourage mums, whether breastfeeding or formula feeding, to feed as much as possible during the daytime, so to minimize reverse cycling, which is where your baby frequently wakes up overnight to feed and feeds less frequently during the day. So basically, they're not feeding as much in the day because they are used to getting all of their nutritional needs met at night. So this is why it's good to feed your baby as much as you can during the day, so that at night time, if they do need to feed, you can feed them and quickly get them back to sleep, but they're not taking all of their daytime feeds at night when ideally you want them to be sleeping. So again, these rapid changes will be, your baby's experiences are going to require glucose, which is food. So it's perfectly reasonable for your baby to wake up overnight and be hungry at this age, even if they perhaps weren't hungry overnight prior to the sleep progression. So night feeds, and should you night wean? So if you feel that night feeds are becoming excessive and are not due to hunger, but do in fact help you to get your little ones sleep, but does in fact help to get your little one back to sleep, then it might be useful to incorporate a dream feed. Now, a dream feed is literally just waking your baby to feed or feeding your baby in their sleep around about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, assuming that you settle them to bed at 7 to 7:30, with the aim of helping to stretch out the time that they're going to wake up again to feed. So you might feed your baby just before they go down to bed at 7, and if you perhaps don't do a dream feed, they might wake up at midnight 1. So if you then wake them or feed them in their sleep at 10, 11, that might then push back the time that they are likely to wake up to perhaps 2, 3 or 4 a.m. or maybe even later. Who knows? Who knows? If, however, you don't want to do this, or even if you are doing a dream feed and you still feel that night feeds are excessive, I always recommend that instead of withholding feeds, you operate the DODR tactic, which stands for don't offer, don't refuse. And that means don't offer your baby a feed, but don't refuse one either. So basically, if your baby wakes up in the night and you feel that it's not about hunger, try and settle them back to sleep without the feed if you can. If it's obvious that your baby is hungry, then by all means feed them and settle them back to sleep. But that's what I mean by don't offer. Try to settle them to sleep without it, but if it's obvious that they want to feed, give it to them and settle them back to sleep. It's perfectly normal for a baby to wake up due to hunger at this age, so trying to night wean them at this point is really not advisable. Night waking is not always down to hunger, and wanting to feed is not always about nutrition. Your baby may just be waking for comfort more than for the actual feed itself. So it's important to be responsive to your baby and to ensure that all needs are met. A hungry or anxious baby is not going to sleep, so be comforting and feeding necessary, and then settle your baby back to sleep as soon as you can. Right, I've taken up so much more of your time. I wanted to cover the rest of the information that I wanted to share with you in part 3. So join me in part 3, where I'm going to be talking about different settling techniques that you can use to help your baby learn to self-settle, and how to tie in everything I've shared with you so far to help your baby to sleep better. And there's a clue, and that's doing it consistently. All right, see you soon.